to welcome you all here to sunny Indianapolis. Well, it was sunny yesterday, perhaps, but our weather is sort of like the basketball season for the Pacers, very up and down. So I'm very glad that you're here, that you came to spend a couple of days with us. I'm quite sure that you're going to get a lot out of the sessions. Today's focus is sort of a tutorial and an introduction to LOINC. The first thing I wanted to say as we get started is that my slides and Jim's slides will all be up on the LOINC website. So traditionally, after one of these sessions, a few days later, we'll get them posted online. So if you want them as a file or online reference, you can go to the LOINC website at any time. There's actually a couple of other tutorials and slide decks up there for your perusal as well. The first thing I wanted to do before really jumping into the content was just give a word of thank you to the many folks that contribute to this work. It's certainly a lot of different people, in particular those here at Regenstrief on the LOINC development team. You've met a few of them. Others will probably come in different times today. Jamie, Katie, Kelly Malott is actually no longer here at Regenstrief, but I left his name up here because he contributed a fair amount in this last round to different things. David Biorto and Clem help as senior content advisors, and the Rama software development team, which John leads, includes Anandi and James Dennis, who have put together another great package for you, another great release, and you'll get to see all of their great work as we go through the rest of the day. I'm also thankful to the LOINC committee members who come and spend their time on this day, even though they've probably heard this tutorial a fair number of times. Thankful that they're here, and obviously their contributions tomorrow as well. And Sandy, who you met on your way in, who's helped organize this meeting and contributes a lot to our work on the LOINC team. So how did LOINC get started? I'm going to describe a little bit about how LOINC came to be. And it really all starts with Clem and his vision for using computers and information technology to help clinicians make better decisions. When Clem arrived here at Regenstrief in the early 70s, he sort of set out on this course to design computer systems to help clinicians take better care of patients. And part of that vision included aggregating and grabbing more and more data to make available to the computer system. So when he started, his medical record system was in a single outpatient diabetes clinic, but he had a vision for a much larger interconnected set of systems. And in the 90s, he described this really well in a JAMA paper where he talked about the rainforest canopy as a good analogy to what we wanted to do with computer systems in healthcare. And he put it like this. He said, the rainforest canopy is a seamless web through which arboreal creatures efficiently move to reach the edible fruits without any attention to the individual trees. That's the kind of healthcare system he had in mind and wanted to help create. But as you know, the current situation is that many computer systems in healthcare function much more like standalone trees. They're not connected really to anything, and it's a whole lot of work to get them to communicate with each other. And so what we sort of had to do was start building bridges across these different islands of data that existed in separate, non-communicable information systems. And so the work that he began here at Regenstrief has continued on. And that record system that started in a single clinic now forms the core of the largest and most comprehensive health information exchange in the United States. It's called the Indiana Network for Patient Care. And so through that journey, we've learned a lot of things about data integration and data exchange. And our role at Regenstrief has been really to serve as sort of the data Switzerland, the hub that's helped connect many of the different healthcare institutions around Indiana in a sort of growing sphere, starting in central Indiana and growing out throughout the rest of the state. And so this was very real, sort of practical work that, that Clem embarked on that ran into big problems. And so some of the problems, as you can imagine, when he started broadening the spectrum of data exchange from one institution to many institutions, was that the systems basically worked like the railroad system in the 1800s or so, which was that stuff didn't move very well. And so if you see this picture, it's a nice illustration of sort of the current state of a lot of technology, which was that in the 1800s, the railroad companies started building tracks, but each company decided how far apart to set those tracks. They set the track gauge at different widths. And so what happened was, if you wanted to ship goods from one part of the country to another part of the country, you would inevitably reach these junction points where one company's track stopped and another's began, but the cars couldn't continue on because they were set at these different widths. So you actually had to unload the cargo from one train car to another train car so that it can continue on its journey. And that's often what we have to do with healthcare data. That is, it doesn't sort of flow seamlessly from one system to another. There's a lot of ETL and other transfers and loads and dumps and so forth in order to get it from one place to another. One part of the solution to this problem is data exchange standards, syntax standards such as HL7 messaging. And so Clem was involved from the beginning in the 80s, and then sort of as it took root into the 90s for getting HL7 widely used. And that solves part of the problem of having a package or an envelope for transmitting data from one system to another. But as he started working on the INPC and was using HL7 to exchange data between different hospitals, realized that there was another deeper problem, which was that the content inside those messages, the individual test results coming from one laboratory and the individual results coming from another laboratory, it turned out that when you looked in those messages, it was really like a Tower of Babel, because everyone was saying different things to mean the same test. And so that's sort of a more fundamental problem that also needed to be addressed with standards. And it was worse because there were a lot of things that you couldn't really tell or figure out just by looking at the test names that were coming in from these different institutions and the messages. There's a lot more underneath to understand, was this test really the same as this other one that's performed at a different institution? And so, you know, to use the Transformers lingo, which my boys love, you know, there's more than meets the eye. That is, what was on the surface in terms of what appeared in the test name or the test description didn't fully give you all the information you needed in order to make the judgment about whether this was really the same test as something else or not. So that was a fundamental challenge that Clem faced here at Regenstrief trying to build the data exchange, and that everyone in the world faces when they're trying to share and aggregate data. And so he wanted to solve that problem, not just for the local thing here, but do it in such a way that it would make a contribution to solving this problem in the broader context of data exchange around the world. So this fundamental challenge is that local systems have different ways of identifying the same concept, and the only way you can get around that or through that is to use standards. Just like you need standards for the threads of a bolt and a nut to make them fit together, we need data exchange standards to help information fit together from one system into another. And so part of that solution is the messaging standards, and another part is vocabulary standards that can serve as sort of this Rosetta Stone across the different local variations and dialects that might exist. So it was out of all that experience that LOINC was born, to solve that problem of needing a universal code standard for data exchange and processing of test results. So LOINC stands for Logical Observation Identifiers, Names, and Codes. We say at LOINC like oink, the sound the pig makes, and this is our friendly LOINC mascot, who is on his way to extinction because the manufacturers are discontinuing production of such pigs. But anyway, he remains. We have a few rare specimens that we're trying to preserve. But you can see he's very friendly. He says LOINC. and the Press Me thing invites you to try him out, which is why you all are here, to try out LOINC and to learn a little bit more about it. So LOINC was established here at the Institute in 1994 as a global terminology standard designed to be specifically for the context of clinical and laboratory observations. One way to think about what LOINC is trying to do in comparison to maybe some of the other terminology standards or code systems that you might be familiar with is to think about we're trying to create codes to distinguish among things that have similar names but different meanings. So we're trying to create codes that distinguish between the meerkats and the meerkats because that's important for clinical interpretation. Another way to think about it is that we're really focused on measurements, things that you can test, measure, or observe. So LOINC is really sort of all about measurements. Measurements are us. One other way to kind of think about what kinds of things LOINC is going to create codes for is to think of this idea of questions and answers. And so if an observation or a test is the question and an observation value or the result is an answer, LOINC is in the business largely of providing codes for questions, and where needed, we point to other vocabularies to provide codes for the answers. So, for example, in the laboratory context, a question might be expressed like, okay, what's my patient's hemoglobin level? And there's a test to measure that, and it's represented by a LOINC code for a hemoglobin measurement. Outside of the clinical laboratory context, there are other kinds of clinical measurements and questions. And so from a sort of individual clinician's perspective, you might ask a question like, well, how fast does my patient usually walk? Because that's a nice predictor of future hospitalization and other things. And so LOINC creates a code for that kind of a measurement or a question as well. In this case, I've shown an example of a code for a 1-week average walking speed as an instance of a kind of measurement that could be used in that context. So LOINC is focused on codes for questions. From the laboratory context, how does this work, and how does LOINC fit in the context of these messaging standards that I talked about earlier? So, for example, here in the INPC, the Indiana Network for Patient Care, or other health information exchange, typically a laboratory who wants to send a result to the HIE or to a provider's EHR is going to package that up in a HL7 message. Typically, these days, we're still seeing mostly HL7 version 2 messages, which if you're not familiar with HL7 message, I actually assume many of you are and have dealt with them. But this is what one looks like. A version 2 message is ASCII text, so it's something you can just look at and read. The key things are that the vertical bars are kind of like database fields. They segregate the information into separate buckets, and each field delineated by those vertical bars has an expected kind of information. And the rows signify different segments of information. So at the top of this message, you see there's a MSH segment, a message header segment that contains information about the producing facility, the receiving facility, and so forth. There's a PID segment, a patient identification segment, with specific places to put the medical record number and other identifying information about the patient. And other such fields, PV1, who are the clinicians involved. And then in a result message like this, there's two other key segments, the OBR and OBX. The OBR being the request segment, the order segment. In this case, I've included an example here of a CBC with an auto diff. And so you see sort of the order, and then the OBX segments are one row for each individual result. And so both within the OBR and OBX segments, if you sort of scan across, you'll see that the structure for identifying test names has a particular pattern, and that pattern has two sets of triplets. The first set of triplets is for identifying the local test name and code, and the second set is for a standard code. And so it's in this context that you see how LOINC fits into such a system. So you can say the local code, the local name, and the code system tells you whether who created this code. It's either hospital A, or in the case of the second triplet, it's where the LOINC code goes. But it's important to know, for example, that in this structure of a message, there are other kinds of information, right? The patient identifier goes somewhere else. The actual result value goes somewhere else. There's a specific field, OBX5, where you put that result value, and there's another field for the units of measure. So not everything has to be expressed in the test name, but that's the space where LOINC is identifying content, is what's needed to be in that OBX3 field to identify what this test is, recognizing that there's a broader context of information around this individual result. So let me show an example like that, except with a coded value, and this actually illustrates nicely a common use of how LOINC and SNOMED fit together. So not every test result is a numeric value. Some tests, the expected result could be coded with another terminology. And so here's an example of an OBX where the data type is CE, or it's a coded element, which essentially means that if you look over in OBX5 where the result value is, that's supposed to be a code from another terminology. So here you see, I sort of stripped off some of the other parts of the message, but here you see, okay, here's a LOINC code for what this observation is. What is this? Well, this is an observation of conditions that were identified by newborn screening. And then if you look over in OBX5, you'll see that that result is a code drawn from SNOMED for PKU. And so here you see sort of the question being identified with a LOINC code, the answer or the value being identified with a SNOMED code. So just for fun, we'll take a brief aside here to talk about a few things. So throughout the day, we'll talk about LOINC as a noun. It's the database, it's the terminology, it's an entity. You all will be involved in LOINCing as a verb, which is fine. You can say we will, to LOINC, or we're currently LOINCing, or when you're all done, you can say you've LOINCed your test catalog. But we also can talk about LOINCers and LOINCologists as nouns as well. So maybe, when you get back home and you've demonstrated you're a real expert, you'll get the head LOINCer label. That's fine. We started working with the government, and they came up with a new thing, which is LOINCification. I didn't know that such a word existed, but it actually is now in official documents. That is the process of turning something that existed previously into a LOINC representation. That process is called LOINCification. So that's fun. And I'm glad my colleagues from ISGSTO are here, because we could try to think of a few more examples, to parallel on the SNOMED side. The only one I've ever been able to think about effectively was to say, maybe you're SNOMEDicated, which is what I always say Jim is whenever I see him, especially in the morning, before about 6 cups of coffee. So I bring that up actually to reinforce another point I was illustrating with sort of the LOINC-SNOMED model, which is to say there are sort of different standards needed, different content standards and different exchange standards needed for different parts of the data exchange puzzle. And LOINC is explicitly focused on one piece of that overall puzzle. So now we can get back to our sort of real business. LOINC divides itself into 2 main categories, laboratory and clinical. It's all LOINC, it's all one database, it's all one terminology, but as far as the committee structure and the advice and even how we organize this meeting, we sort of divide ourselves into laboratory and clinical because it's made sense, and different people are sometimes interested in these 2 different pieces. Laboratory LOINC you could think of as essentially anything that you can test, measure, or observe about a specimen, something you would withdraw from the body. And LOINC covers essentially everything that you would think of as normal clinical laboratory content. This Wordle sort of shows in relative terms, the size of the word demonstrates the number of concepts we have in these different classes. So you can see, most of the typical laboratory categories are reflected here. On the clinical side, that is essentially anything that you can test, measure, observe about a patient or a body part or even a population of patients. And so much of the clinical content is not as extremely focused in the key categories. There's sort of smaller number of terms in lots of different categories. But some of the big ones that LOINC covers, radiology, you'll see the names of many specific data sets. Patient assessment instruments, large data sets like Phoenix, which is a set of measures for measuring phenotype for use in genome-wide association studies. The smaller words, though not less important, you'll find things like measurements on OB ultrasound, history and physical measurements, vital signs. All of those things are represented in the clinical side of LOINC, even dental measurements and EKG measurements, variety of different things. So along those lines of the laboratory and clinical world, our committees are chaired by Clem McDonald, who I've mentioned before and will be here tomorrow. The Clinical LOINC Committee is chaired by Stan Huff from the Intermountain Healthcare and University of Utah. LOINC not only creates codes for individual observations, so tests, measurements, those kind of things, but also creates codes for different collections of those observations. And in different worlds, different domains, there are different names for those kinds of collections. So laboratory, you typically think of panels or batteries. In the clinical side, you might think of forms or surveys, patient assessment instruments, or even documents. And LOINC creates codes for those structures to hold different collections of individual measurements as well. We have a particularly well-developed set of structures and metadata for representing standardized assessment instruments as one kind of collection, which was an evolution from the core model we used for laboratory panels. I won't go into much detail about this model now, but I just wanted to mention that it's a sort of a specialized area that we've in the last few years put a fair amount of work in, and there's a couple of papers that we've written that's described that approach. In general, how does LOINC approach term creation and its overall business? I typically use 3 words to categorize our approach to this, and that is open, nimble, and pragmatic. So how does that work? Well, open in a couple of different senses of the word. So the first is that LOINC is distributed worldwide at no cost. I like to say it's free, but it's invaluable. So it's open in the sense that anybody can get it and use it, but also open in the sense that new terms are added to the database based on requests from end users. That is, us here at Regenstrief are not out prospecting the world for what we think might be the next greatest code to add. You know, it's all based on requests from people that are using LOINC and finding gaps in what they have represented in their system and what is in LOINC currently. Then that's been the case since the very beginning, which is part of what grounds us in pragmatics, which is that we're not creating codes for things that don't actually exist in the real world. These are all based on somebody's representation. It existed in someone's system first. Open development in the sense that we welcome participation from all comers. That is, anyone can make a request. We welcome participation at meetings like this, whether you're an individual, a solo provider or consultant, or a large laboratory or a Ministry of Health, all are welcome here. And we're also grateful, as I mentioned, to our committee members who are volunteers. Regenstrief's role is really to serve as the overall steward of the LOINC activity, to coordinate the various inputs and to produce the output of the terminology. So we're responsible for developing the content, for developing tools around the content to make it easier to use, more accessible, and so forth, to help foster development of the community, to be the official publication source, the distributor of LOINC, and also to serve as the liaison, the voice of LOINC in the context of other organizations, SDOs, standards development organizations, and standards activities around the world. We're supported by 2 primary sources currently. So the U.S. National Library of Medicine has been a core funding source, and as is the Regenstrief Foundation. In the past, we've had support from other federal agencies and the Hartford Foundation for specific projects and activities, but our sort of core staple funding sources are the NLM and Regenstrief. This graph shows over time how LOINC has grown in terms of the content that's inside it. And I'm fascinated by this graph even as we progress with new releases. So this goes back to the first release in April of '95 until today. So today, the last release, this is actually of the December, the official release back then, just over 73,000 codes. The blue is kind of the total number of codes, and the orange represents the proportion of the LOINC content that's laboratory content. It's roughly split into 2/3, 1/3. So 2/3 of it are laboratory observations, 1/3 of it is clinical content. But you'll notice, our work isn't really slowing down. And this is now, this year is actually sort of the 20th anniversary of LOINC getting going. And you might have expected our sort of growth to sort of plateaued at some point, but that's not the case. And there are a number of reasons for that. One is that diagnostic testing continues to change and evolve. Currently, we get lots of weird and wacky new stuff all the time that it never ceases to amaze us and never ceases to end. But there's also different domains of content that change and grow and flux over time. And so it's not necessarily just one thing. It's not just laboratory. It's not just clinical content that continues to that growth. But in the last 10 years, we've been running at a faster pace than we did 15 years ago or so. And that wasn't, if you'd asked us to predict what it would look like, it might not have been this. But this growth is also a function of the number of users of LOINC because they contribute new inputs into the system. They're requesting new content. So there's always a lot cooking, a lot going on. So more lab tests, genetic reporting is a major, major area. Many people are evolving to more structured reporting of things, structured capture and reporting of things like survey instruments and forms. We have a big collaboration going on around radiology reports, structured document titles, and so forth. So you can get all of the stuff that we produce about LOINC from the website. I'm assuming most of you have been there because you had to register for this meeting by that. There are a few things on the website, downloading the resources and so forth, that require a user login. And over time, that's grown quite a bit. So currently we have over 32,000 registered users from 162 different countries, including some very, very small countries that I am completely amazed that anyone knows about LOINC there, but it's always fun to hear of new users. That growth has been kind of like a straight line up. So this is the plot of since 2008 when we started requiring a registration for a few different things, how the number of users have grown. And you can see it's going up. So we're adding about 725 new users a month, or almost 9,000 new users each year. And just looking back kind of in the recent past, we doubled the number of registered users in less than 2 years. And that has sort of continued to tick up. So looking back, how many average users how many average new users were we getting back in 2009? Well, it was less than 300. Whereas today, like I said, we're averaging about 700 or so new users per month. From the website, that's kind of our central hub for where we distribute both the content and the tools. And I wanted to highlight some of the tools that exist for using LOINC without spending a lot of time on RELMA, because that'll be the focus of the rest of the day. But from the download page, you can essentially get a couple different things. So you can get the LOINC and RELMA package, which is the most popular option. RELMA is the most common way people use and interact with LOINC. But depending on your use case, you could download just the table if you're going to load it into another database. We also publish some accessory files, including a file that has this panel and form hierarchical structure, a file for the document ontology, as well as a couple of other accessory files. And you can also get RELMA just as a standalone executable file. put together, the core standard is downloaded about 1,400 times per month. One of our newer additions to the website about 6 months or so ago was a quick start guide. So if you go to the homepage, there's a link to it. This is kind of designed to be the 15-minute, I don't know anything about LOINC, how do I figure out what's what? And so by the end of today, you won't need to read this, but for your friends back home, maybe you could point them to it. So you can get to it, just loinc.org.get started, and it kind of walks through the basics of what LOINC is all about and where to go for next steps after that. We also offer an online search tool, which is sort of like Realma Lite. It has the core search capabilities like Realma does, so all the tips and tricks that you'll learn for doing searches in Realma, that syntax works the same way on this, this search site, but it doesn't have all the nice features for actually doing mapping. So you'll learn about how to load your catalog into Realma and go one by one mapping your local tests to LOINC codes. It doesn't have that, but is a very handy way to just search the content of LOINC, and it's always updated whenever we publish a new version of LOINC. This application gets updated as well, and is a nice option for those of us who use Apple computers and can't install Realma without a virtual machine. So from that search application, and just like in Realma, when you find a LOINC term on a grid, you can click over to a more detailed view to see some accessory content of what's in the database for that particular term. And so this is an example of one of the details pages for a term that has things like the definition and description. It has some of these other attributes, which I'll briefly mention later, talking about its ranking as a common test or not a not so common test, which panels this particular measurement might be a part of, and so forth. The online search is also helpful for our international users who might be looking to interact with the various translations that are in LOINC. So you can go to the set language option and choose one of the translations, and there's a nice structure in this program that even lets translators provide translations of the individual prompts and buttons and so forth. And so if so many of the translations have done that for this program too. And so here, example, if I choose Italian, you can actually see cerca as the label for the search button and so forth, and then the translations appear in the Italian translation as well. So so that's handy. From the website, you can also sign up for our two main mailing lists. One is a sort of a news announcements list, and the other is focused on the clinical content. This is not a discussion list. This is just where we publish new stuff that's happening with LOINC. Is a great way to get notified when new releases come, because it's pretty low volume. Like we're talking maybe 2 messages a month, not like a flood. So you won't get, your inbox won't get overloaded if you subscribe to this. But is a nice way to get updated. You can also follow us on Twitter, and you're welcome to tweet about whatever we're talking about the next 2 days that might be interesting to you. If you follow us, this is actually where we post a lot more sort of what's happening in the community, news things that are going on, new articles that come out that are talking about LOINC and so forth. As I mentioned at the outset, there's a set of resources, slideshows, slide decks that are available for online viewing, also from the website. There's a directory of adopters, which is something I hope you consider after your organization has been successfully LOINC'd. You might want to describe to others how you're using LOINC, and that's what this directory does. It's just it's a voluntary listing of how people are using LOINC, and it's free. You don't have to pay anything to get listed here. And so I'd encourage you to submit a form entry that describes your organization and what you're doing with LOINC. It can also be a helpful way for LOINC users to connect with other people who might be doing similar things. For example, if you offer consulting services or mapping services, people can find out that that's something you offer. We've had people connect on, the keyword SunQuest or whatever, like help from similar folks. So that's kind of what the idea is for this organization. There's also a more specific sort of discussion forum for LOINC users at forum.loinc.org, also a link from the homepage there. This is a place for LOINC users to sort of talk amongst themselves and troubleshoot together, ask questions, and get clarification about different approaches to LOINC. This isn't a ask Reagan Street anything you want and we'll answer it. This is more sort of a peer-to-peer kind of question thing. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that forum and participate there as well. Some of the other resources that we have available on the LOINC website are a set of things that we sort of try to curate down some of the more frequently used concepts. So I mentioned that there's 73,000 codes in LOINC. Almost no use case needs all of them. And so sometimes it's a bit overwhelming. You sort of when you go in and you start mapping and so forth, how do I know what I need out of this sort of 73,000 list? And using sort of the Pareto principle and the 80-20 rule, whatever, we've built a couple of subset lists that help you get more closely to the more commonly used things. So there's a set of the top 2,000 result codes, which was derived empirically based on real data from a national sample. There's a set of the most common order codes in LOINC, also derived empirically, though there's an activity we'll talk about tomorrow going on now to kind of reboot that with a more revised list, but that's the previous effort is right there. And then not necessarily explicitly related to LOINC, but for those of you who are interested in standardizing units of measure, the UCOM standard for sort of computable units of measure representation is also something that came out of Reagan Street, Gunther Shadow, and Clem's work on this. And we have kind of a common list of UCOM codes. And it's one of those things where if people are interested in UCOM, sometimes it's a little bit intimidating standard to get your head around the first time. But when you see sort of the example of what these look like for most of the common ones, the common units that you're familiar with, it's much less daunting. So that table shows some of the common UCOM codes. So those are all available. For the common result codes, we also created actually a mapper's guide with specific advice about mapping within the context of those commonly reported LOINC codes. And so there's some description advice, mapping advice at the level of the class, and then different subsets and even individual terms. And you can get that as a spreadsheet or PDF download as well from that website. One of the newer things that we've been working on is this idea of now that LOINC has been out and is being used more widely, what kinds of tools or resources we could develop to help sort of harness that knowledge of LOINC mapping in the world. And so, the question from a research perspective that we were interested in asking was, could it help novice LOINCers? Conversely, you might think, no, it won't help at all. But we wanted to do some work to understand, is this a fruitful direction or not? And so our first evaluation of this was published in a JAMIA paper where we were trying to determine, based on the data that's in the INPC, whether we could use the existing mappings as sort of a corpus and use some information retrieval technology to how well could the corpus predict future mapping. So when we get the next hospital 101, could we use the 100 other hospitals that already been mapped, their data, to inform and automate the process of mapping that next one in line. So in this paper, we compared two specific approaches or technology things for doing that automated mapping. Maxent, which is a maximum entropy technology, and LOINC, which is a common information retrieval type thing. And the difference between these two approaches isn't that important. We were also just really trying to provide sort of a proof of concept, like, is there any hope that this sort of a thing will work? And the good news is that we were actually pretty encouraged. So what this table from that paper shows was, based on a corpus of existing stuff from 100 or so different institutions with like 80,000 records in it. If we took 3 other institutions that had never been seen before, how well do these algorithms do at mapping? And you know, it's actually, whoops, went too fast. Whoops. Here we go. All right, so it actually wasn't too bad. So roughly 79% or so using this Maxent thing could get ranked number 1. That is, it got the right code, the sort of gold standard mapping at the top. And then if you looked at sort of what it could rank in the top 5, you know, more like 90% or so, which, you know, choosing from among 5 highly probable terms is a lot faster than searching the entire database of 73,000. But one of the cool things about the Maxent scoring system was that it provided a 0 to 1 score, and we looked at whether you could use a cutoff score as sort of saying, okay, if it's above a certain threshold, you know, is this thing always going to be right? And it turns out if we sort of set that threshold at a particular Maxent score, like not quite, almost 60% of the local labs in those 3 systems would have always been ranked number 1. So it was sort of like, well, if half of the tests in your catalog could be very highly automatically mapped, boy, that would save you a lot of time. And then you could focus your more detailed review on that other half. And so that was sort of encouraging to us, and so we wanted to do this on a little bit broader scale and make it available to the LOINC community. But first we had to build a more representative corpus of mappings. We were just doing this based on the INPC data, which is geographically constrained and so forth. So we set out to build that technology in RELMA, and some of you may have been participating in this study all along, but we built sort of a community repository where people could contribute their mappings to it and then connected RELMA up to it. The good news is that this the study part is now over, and so starting with the version of RELMA that you will have for the tutorial here and what we'll publish as a final release later this month is sort of automatic, and anybody can, without joining the study, you can access this community mapping repository. So the idea here was to build into RELMA what everyone was already using, a connection to sort of what some other people were doing. And so we started by creating this repository, which 22 organizations from 5 countries contributed their mappings to, and there's roughly 100,000 or so mappings of individual tests mapped to LOINC codes in it. And so you can, when RELMA fires up, if you log in to the system, then you sort of get unlocked this these extra bonus fields in your RELMA application, which show you the number of codes and the number of institutions that have mapped to a particular LOINC code in the result grid. So the 2 extra columns over here, com maps and com institutions, are those 2 fields, and they're sortable, so you could sort the result list based on, just like in any of the other fields that Jim will show you, you can sort it based on the number of institutions that are mapped to that LOINC code. But not only that, you can also click on those, and then it'll pull up a details page, which actually shows you the individual local test names and the units of measure for those institutions. So that can be a helpful check or review, or you can sort of see how other people have named things similarly, and it kind of helps narrow down, is this really the right LOINC code for me or not? But almost as important, and this is, I would like to emphasize this, that is, the repository is only going to be as good as the set of things that people contribute to it. And so I definitely would encourage you, after you have mapped some of your tests, to send them our way for population in this repository so that other people can benefit from it. It's pretty easy in RELMA. Once you get a set of mappings, I think it's over 200 or so, you can just click that little upload button and it'll have a form that will send them our way. So I definitely would encourage you to contribute your mappings once you've gotten them to a point where you're ready. The latest and last tool or resource that I want to mention is our brand new thing. So You probably heard about this through the web or through our announcements if you're connected that way. We're really excited about a new premium membership program that we just launched. This has been a product of a long gestation period to sort of get the right things right, but as you think back to that graph of the number of users, and then when I reference sort of our funding sources have been basically flat or stable, whereas the number of users continued to go up. So as we've discussed in this committee meeting for a number of different times, the need to sort of build an additional scalable revenue stream was essential, and so this membership program is one of those things. So what is it? Well, it's basically a set of resources that you can subscribe to on an annual basis. And one of those, there's a couple of different options. So one is individual memberships that give you a package of things, and I'll go through those. And then there's also a set of opportunities to contribute higher levels at a patron or benefactor level to donate to the LOINC cause in exchange for some special recognition. So two main paths. One is individual memberships, and the other are these special sponsorships. So on the individual membership side, you get access to top priority support, which we're transitioning now. As you might expect, we get a lot of emails, a lot of questions. And there's no way that with our small team we could respond to everyone. And as the scale and breadth of different ways people are using LOINC has grown, the questions range from the completely naive to the very, very complex, and we just quite simply had no way of responding to all of those, and continue to do the stuff that that you all expect us to do, like build the standard. So we're sort of funneling that through our premium membership as one way to help filter that and build additional resources around responding to those support requests. You can also get access to, we'll automatically send you the change file that comes out with each release, so you can get that Delta file pushed to you automatically. You can also get access to past releases, which is one of the things that we're frequently asked for, either through the membership site as a download or through a FTPS server, which is super handy if you actually are really geeky and want to script the automatic download of the new version when it comes out, as opposed to kind of going through the website and clicking through. This FTPS site is something you can write a little shell script to grab. And there's also a option to purchase this mapping validity check, which is a program that you can essentially, you can take your mappings, send them our way, we'll run our program through it, and it'll provide you back a report of potential inaccuracies in your mapping, things to look at, to double check, to watch out for, which we think will be a helpful resource for a lot of people. But in addition, all of this goes to supporting our noble cause, which is sort of providing the core resources for free to the world. So we would encourage you to check that out. So I think you all actually have in your packet somewhere these forms. So if you don't want them, I think you might know somebody who does. But take a look at both the individual forms and then the patron and benefactor forms as well, if this is something your organization might be interested in. So at the other levels of contribution, the patron level and the benefactor level, there are a different set of benefits. The core things are basically you're contributing to help us make LOINC available to the world. In response, we'll give special recognition, so a special banner in the adopter directory. You'll also have access to a logo that you can use in marketing materials that sort of identifies you as a patron or premium supporter of LOINC, as well as options to purchase some of these other things as standalone things. And at the benefactor levels, we'll include and do special recognition both on the website, recognizing our benefactors, and at meetings such as this. The pricing is available on the website. This slide kind of lays out the structure. going from individual memberships all the way to the platinum benefactors. So this is fun and new and exciting, and I would strongly encourage you to check out what's available, and we would love it if you would sign up. But before I leave, you might be thinking, well, okay, now you have this membership thing, well, what's still free? I just want to emphasize, like, all the awesomeness you've come to expect from us for free is still free. These are things we've sort of added on. The premium program is sort of the stuff we've added on to it. So the LOINC table, the files, Realma, documentation, coming to these meetings, the search app, submitting new concepts, like all that stuff is still free to the world. But if you really love it, you can also just donate. And this is something new. We sort of took a page from Wikipedia, which is like, if you go there every day, it's a pretty valuable resource. I mean, there's a lot of awesome stuff. And so sometimes you just want to say, okay, maybe I'll just give $5 or something. So if you think this meeting is awesome, you leave here and are stimulated, and you just want to like cover your lunch, you could give us $25 or something. And you could do this at any time. But just going to members.loinc.org/donate, or on the main website, there's a donate button as well. This is kind of for the one-off sort of special things. But if you like this and want to contribute back, go for it. We definitely appreciate your support. So that's the premium membership program and the set of resources we offer. I'm going to describe just briefly the terms of use, and then close with a couple of sort of big take-home points for your thinking about the rest of the day today. So it's helpful to describe, I think, if you're new to LOINC, what is the copyright? I've mentioned that it's free, but what does it involve? So our approach to licensing LOINC is kind of like this picture. Not really, actually. We believe copyright is a good thing for standards. You really want your standards to be copyrighted, because you don't want multiple variations to exist. That's the whole purpose of standardization, is having one and only one sort of authoritative source that everybody can agree to. But of course, it's a licensing part that is interesting and is where people would pay attention. So copyright is good, licensing is interesting. So the LOINC license, basically, what does it include? Well, you can get LOINC and use it at no cost worldwide forever. That's kind of the main thing. Well, what can you do with LOINC? Well, you can use it, you can copy it, you can actually distribute it for any purpose, both commercial and non-commercial purposes, with one major caveat. So this is my summary of the license. You have to read it. The lawyers will tell me read it, tell me to tell you to read it. But the one thing that you can't do with LOINC is use any of the stuff that we produce to develop or promulgate different standards for orders or observations. And why is that caveat in there? Well, that would defeat the entire purpose of why we're doing this stuff in the first place. So you can't take LOINC, remove the LOINC codes, make your own codes, call it better LOINC or better whatever, and publish it somewhere else. That would defeat the whole purpose of having a standard, and that's why that caveat is in there. So real quick, I'm going to share some highlights about how LOINC is being picked up and used around the world. So we have contributions from a number of different people. Over 150 organizations in the last few years have made requests for new LOINC terms. We're really excited about the growth in translation. I'm glad to have representatives from Italy here, and Canada as well. They've been key contributors to that. So right now there are 22 organizations working on translations. Published in this upcoming release will be 18 variations of 11 different languages, with the newest being one out of Belgium. And so this is a slide that sort of shows the various ways that the word glucose can be represented in LOINC as an illustration of the different kinds of content that is in LOINC that's been translated. Over time, we've evolved our process for enabling translations, and this is a paper that describes that approach if you're interested in reading more. It talks about what we do as an SDO to facilitate the translations. And one of the things I wanted to point out was one of the authors on this paper was Maria, who was our first international LOINC PhD student. And in this is a nice case study of the Italian approach to the LOINC translation process using kind of the tools and the processes that we've developed. So that was a nice contribution. There's a listing on the website of basically all the translations that are there and what other resources might be available. Some folks have translated, say, the user's guide or these tutorials, other things, as well as just the content. In addition to translation, LOINC has been adopted as an official national standard in a long and growing list of countries. So I think we're somewhere over 25 now. This is kind of my current list of places that I know have an official sort of on-the-books adoption of LOINC as a national standard. In addition to that, there are a lot of large implementations around the world, and we constantly hear about new things, and actually we'll get an update on some of these tomorrow in our discussion at the committee meeting, but large health information exchanges around the world using LOINC. One of the examples of a large organization using LOINC is the APHP system in Paris, which I believe is the largest hospital system in Europe. And they have written up a little bit about how they've used LOINC, and I think it's a helpful illustration for using LOINC as kind of the key thing that helped them aggregate their test results across their many, many different facilities. That approach was written about in a paper in JAMIA about, I think it was last year, about a year ago. Their take-home message was sort of, we're glad we used LOINC, which I think is a worthwhile one. And as another example, in the Philippines, the National Health Insurance Program is now requiring LOINC for payment of laboratory tests. So if you want to get paid for doing a test there, you got to submit the LOINC code for it. Here's a view of some members of the Korean National Standards Committee who have embraced LOINC and are using LOINC. Here's some very serious LOINCing happening in Hong Kong. Here's some not so serious LOINCing happening who knows where. Here is us speaking with the Thai Ministry of Health, Ministry of Information and Communication Technology about LOINC. This is a nice shot of Dr. Case leading, I'm not sure if it was serious or not so serious LOINCing in Cyprus, but advanced LOINCing nonetheless in Cyprus. Within the U.S., I'll just mention briefly a couple of things. So the key U.S. adoptions, I mean, essentially here in the USA, all of the big labs, I'll call them the referral labs, commercial laboratories, have used LOINC, and many for a very, very long time, being part of the committee and the development. Essentially, all of the health-related federal agencies that deal with health data have adopted LOINC. Many care organizations, all the health information exchanges that I know of do it. Increasingly, we see examples of insurance companies using LOINC, EHR vendors, and then our excitement really gets up when we hear about instrument manufacturers who are adopting LOINC and trying to provide LOINC codes for the tests that come out of their kits and their instruments, because that really goes a long ways and reduces this mapping problem significantly when you can get the LOINC code directly from the manufacturer. So as an example, some of the ways in which this is happening, sometimes on the website as a file you can download, sometimes it's in the actual information that comes with the instrument. But here you can see from Beckman Coulter, a hematology thing, where they're basically listing the codes, the LOINC codes for the measurements that come out there. Insurance companies use LOINC for a variety of different purposes, both internal and interfacing with providers. So as an example, United Health has a program that essentially is kind of a pay-for-performance type program, like what's happening in a lot of different contexts for quality measures. And so essentially, how do you define the quality measure? Well, increasingly as things are moving towards being able to more automatically compute these things, the definition of what's a measure can be expressed as a collection, a formula using standard vocabulary, if the parts of that measure can be expressed with coded terminology. So as an example, United Health has a quality metric around diabetes, and the measure relates to the number of patients in a certain age that have had hemoglobin A1C in the last 12 months. And so that, okay, how many patients had a hemoglobin A1C can be expressed as a list of possible LOINC codes that the EHR could then be queried and evaluated to see did the patient have one of these things. And so, they publish, sort of the list of LOINC codes that make up that measure. But of course, in the context of what's happening in the USA, a lot of what's going on in standards in health information technology and informatics is being driven by the Meaningful Use program. I would assume many of you are familiar with that, have heard about it. It's sort of set up in 3 stages of providing reimbursement incentives to providers and hospitals if they use certified electronic health record technology. And the part of certification has to do with what these systems can do and how they do it. And a lot of it is, the criteria is based on data exchange and the use of standards. And those standards sort of are ramping up. The requirements for those are ramping up through these progressive stages. So we're sort of in stage 2 right now, which started this year. In the regulations, LOINC has been named for a couple of different contexts. The brief summary is, LOINC is needed for the criteria around viewing, downloading, or transmitting data to third parties, for reporting cancer cases to the state registry, for sending and receiving electronic lab results to ambulatory settings, for providing care summaries at transitions and clinical summaries to patients, and also submitting reportable lab tests to public health. And so these are all different contexts around which LOINC is required. So as an example, in the criteria around laboratory reporting to EHRs, what's sort of named as the standard for how to do that is this HL7 implementation guide. And if you look at what that says about how do I populate OBX3, that part of the message where LOINC fits, it essentially says, LOINC is the standard coding system to use here, except for basically for all purposes where there's a valid LOINC code. In addition, part of the Meaningful Use program revolves around quality measures, and the HIT Standards Committee has reviewed and come out with some guidance about how those quality measures get expressed in electronic definitions. And across many different domains of contexts, the committee recommends LOINC sort of as the code for the question, and SNOMED as a code for the answer, and ARC-SNORM as a code for medications. But those sort of 3 sort of fit together across many, many different domains, such as non-lab diagnostic studies, functional status, disability evaluation, patient preference, and so forth. So the impact of that is that the national efforts around quality measures are using these guidelines for how do you define what the measure is. So to use kind of the similar example of diabetes, this is a measure from the NCQA where the performance that's being evaluated is poor control of diabetes as reflected by hemoglobin A1C measures. And so you have sort of this similar thing where it's looking at, okay, patients with diabetes who have had a particular hemoglobin A1C level above a threshold, how does that get expressed? Well, you can say, okay, when we're talking about hemoglobin A1C level, I need to have this list of possible LOINC codes to look in the EHR to figure out whether my patient met or did not meet that criteria. So I'll summarize all of that by saying everyone loves LOINC, but you might not want to try that at home. So thanks for kind of going with me on that journey of LOINC, where it is, where it's going. Let me close with a few sort of key lessons to take into the more hands-on portion of today. So the first lesson is that I think it's important to recognize that this mapping problem is not just an IT problem. So I'm hoping that if you are sort of an IT person who's been tasked with mapping, that you'll make friends with your clinical counterparts, because as you'll go through and learn more today, the trick is not is very much a deep sort of content domain issue and not really a technical issue. But yet, in many contexts, people think, well, it's just codes and lists of codes and a system integration. And so sometimes this mapping task is sort of handed off to a developer who might make good judgments on some things, but doesn't have the background and the questioning to understand whether these two things are really clinically the same or not. So just to recognize that this is an IT problem and that clinical expertise is necessary. And in that vein, to say a little bit more, there's a lot that is ambiguous or not stated, and you can really get into trouble if you assume things, because you'll be wrong at least some of the time. So some of the things that you don't want to assume that can be helped by digging further to get the right information available to when you're trying to do a mapping is units of measure. Got to have them for anything that's quantitative. You'll hear that about 50,000 times over the next 2 days. Maybe not that many, but a lot. But also, for things that are not quantitative, having example or sample results can help you pick the right LOINC scale, and you'll learn more about that in a second. But sort of expanding that stuff even further, having available to you local experts the actual documentation for how a particular test is formed, like package inserts or SOPs or whatever, can be extremely informative. Sometimes you don't have that luxury, but if you assume certain things, you'll be wrong, and so you want to set yourself up to having as much information available in the mapping process as possible. The second big picture thing I want to sort of say is to encourage you to help us sort of push this standardization stuff as far upstream as possible. So as I mentioned, we're encouraged by the degree of communication and interest we're getting from instrument and test kit manufacturers, but that is often driven by the customers. So if you're in a position of purchasing stuff, ask, what are the LOINC codes for this? And if they don't have them, if enough people start asking, then they'll come to us and they'll want to provide this. We're seeing it happen, but we'd love to see it happen faster. So we're encouraged by efforts like the IICC, which is a collaboration of many important manufacturers who have sort of gotten behind the idea of providing LOINC codes for their measurements and using HL7 out of their instruments. And so we'd like to see this continue to grow. The next thing is I just sort of want to emphasize that this isn't a one-time thing. It's not a destination. And keeping your data mapped to LOINC in a sort of fresh way is going to be an ongoing journey. So you want to plan for that up front and sort of set the expectations around knowing that you're going to have to update this. Either as your testing changes, you start adding new things or don't do other things, which isn't as common, but what is super common is that the local code identifiers change. So if you get a new LIS system, a lot of times, everything has to be remapped or relinked to these other kind of identifiers. Or if your organization buys another facility and you have to sort of integrate their stuff with your stuff, sometimes your stuff loses out. So you're going to have to plan that this isn't just a one-time thing, and once you go live, you're going to have to keep up this sort of maintenance activity. The other thing to sort of keep in mind is you might be thinking, I can't do it all. That is, we don't have resources to do it all right now. So how might I approach this this problem? So one line of thinking is how would I prioritize it? And so local or national policies might help target subsets that are maybe your first bet of things, depending on what you want to do. And maybe, but maybe you do want to do it all, which we think would be the best option. But recognizing this sort of Pareto principle, when we did analysis of stuff in INPC, a few tests really cover a whole lot. And it actually turned out like 80 tests accounted for 80% of the volume, and less than 500 accounted for 99% of the volume. And there's this big long tail of stuff that's relatively rare. And so for a lot of purposes, you can get a long ways if you get that stuff mapped right away. And so that's part of our rationale for trying to make it easy to get that stuff right with the top 2,000 and so forth. But of course, you need to be mindful of what are you trying to do. That is, when something is mapped for what purpose and what are the downstream expected outcomes of that. So there's a lot of interest now, and rightfully so, on secondary uses, because that's the big benefit. Once you get data that's interoperable, you can do things other than its original purpose. So public health reporting might be one, electronic quality measures might be another. But if you prioritize and direct your mapping effort up front to exclude a certain subset of terms, you got to be mindful of what you're going to do later and how that's going to screw you up or help you in your secondary uses. So one of the papers we did just kind of looked at how do these different sets of codes line up. So the set of most common lab result codes, how does that relate to the set of codes that are being defined in the quality measures versus those that are helpful for public health reporting, sort of the Venn diagram look. And, you know, they don't totally overlap. You know, they're definitely different things. So that's why you want to be mindful of how you're approaching it. So for any given purpose, there might be a sort of a greatest hits. You know, like I said, all 73,000 are never going to be used. But depending on your context, you might be able to sort of narrow in on the set of things that are most helpful to you. So to wrap up, thanks for coming. I'm glad that you're here, and you know, to at least get your feet wet. But hopefully you'll do more than get your feet wet. You'll actually jump in and have a good, a nice, safe, refreshing landing. But happy LOINCing, and we'll see you. Thanks.